Okay. Hi, everybody. We'll get started in this last session. As Raphael said, he got a good session. We got an even better one. So, in terms of the timing of it, so thank you for being here. First of all, my name is Cormac Forkan. I'm a lecturer here in the School of Sociology and Politics and senior researcher here for God knows how long in the Child and Family Research Centre. So we're here today to talk to you through the medium of a fireside chat. And as Cormac, our AV technician, said to me when I said we had a few slides, what are you using slides for with a fireside chat? So what I'm going to do is, before I join the panelists over here, is just to introduce the concept of what we're talking about, which is a democratic school. And just to give you the sense of what that is and so on. And I'll do that fairly briefly, and then I'll go over and talk to my colleagues over here. So if you think about the nature of a fireside, think of like thousands of years as humans, we've always gathered around a fire to talk about, argue about, cry about, laugh about, whatever it might be that's important to us. So even that we might be beside a heat pump now that we've to sit, it's still important that we have that space to be, the space to be and talk and argue and discuss and think about these kinds of things that are important. Why are we doing it today? Because we want to hear about something that's central to our work here in the centre, is the idea of children's agency and participation, in this case within a democratic school in Wicklow. For those of you that aren't familiar, Wicklow is on the east coast over beside Dublin. So that's kind of what we're trying to do for you today. So just to kind of set the context briefly, I'm not going to dwell on this because we've talked about it enough over the period of the day. But, where are we with youth participation? We know from kind of what we've talked about and where we're coming from with our own experience is that, it's widely accepted that youth participation should be a core principle in research policy and practice. But as the Minister mentioned this morning, the journey from intention to impact can be fraught with difficulties. And I thought she kind of, she did a good job trying to kind of explain that and so on. And that, that meaningful and sustainable youth participation piece is still something that's a question mark. And that's what this whole conference is about the new frontiers. How can we push the frontiers a little bit forward? If we go on to what UNESCO have, which is in your brochure and so on for the conference, what UNESCO asked us to do as a community to think about the next level, the new opportunities about how we can bring youth participation to this new frontier. How can we kind of do that and so on. Sorry, I keep changing the channel here. So from the point of view of our input today, we think it's fairly timely. Of course we would, because we're doing it, but we think it's timely given why, because first of all, the call to action. That call to action grounds us all as researchers, policymakers, practitioners, whatever it might be that we call ourselves, to do something better. Now, what we're looking at in particular is we're looking at that in relation to, some of you might know, there's a convention on education going on in Ireland at the moment, which is looking at trying to rethink or reimagine the education system for the next 30 years. And I know Professor Lundy is part of that secretariat. So we're kind of at that juncture, as it shows on the slide, Department of Education and Youth. The two are together again, so we're kind of at a good place to look at this concept within education and bring in participation to that kind of discussion. So what we're trying to do is give you something meaningful to chew on, to think about. Raphael got you to clap 3 times. I was thinking, what would I get you to do? You're probably thinking about me, or see me as a burger, because you're beginning to think about the barbecue. The point is we can talk about it. So be it vegan, vegetarian, or meat, whatever you want yourself. But anyway, we'll do that. We'll do that later. I suppose the main thing about this is we're not suggesting this is the magic bullet. So what we're going to talk to you about is, it's not the panacea, it's not the magic bullet, as Raphael mentioned in his piece, but what it is, it's an example of what's possible. And that's important. This is an example of kind of what's possible, and that's kind of where we're trying to get to. So in terms of our guests over here, so I'm delighted to welcome Dorothee Potter-Daniau, who I'm fortunate to say that I am co-supervising her with Dr. Cliona Murray from the School of Education here on a Research Ireland funded project where she's looking at democratic schooling and inclusion, and the Wicklow Democratic School that we're about to hear about is where she has based her research on. So Dorothee has a lot of experience in teaching and training and facilitation and monitoring and evaluation, be it here in France. So we'll bring a great sense of value to what we're talking about. And then on the far side is Rachel Kuhn. And so Rachel has nearly a decade of experience as a democratic educator and facilitator, and she works in the Wicklow Democratic School, so she can tell us the ins and outs of what it's like to be there on a day-to-day basis. and your passion is for trying to understand how society works and how you can contribute to positive kind of change, and hopefully that's what you'll take away from what we're trying to do today as well. So if we think about, and we've heard it often enough, if we think about the nature of Article 12, a democratic school, for those of you that might be familiar with it, on the bottom you can see the website address for the European Association or the European group that works in this particular area. But the claim is that democratic schools are communities where Article 12 is fully realised. And obviously you can argue the toss if that is the case or not, but that's the claim. That's what we're trying to get to today. So you can make up your own mind about that as we go on. Just for those of you that might be familiar, what is a democratic school? We could talk obviously for the whole session about this, but there are three pillars, there are three core elements to it. The first element is, as you can see, a culture of shared values and equality. Shared with who? Shared with everybody inside the door of the particular school, so be it the facilitators, the young people themselves, and so on. The second one is, the second pillar is collective decision making with equal input. So it kind of goes central to what we've been talking about and what we're interested in as a community. What shall we decide together? How can we do this kind of work together? And the third element of it is, which kind of any of you that have studied any of this kind of stuff in your own kind of studies up to this, kind of liberal approach to education, this idea of kind of self-directed, inquiry-based learning and discovery is central to it. So in a nutshell, and I know I'm not doing it justice, but they're the three kind of core elements of what we're about. Just before I leave it, at the actual Wicklow Democratic School, in terms of that last piece of the model that I'm just showed you there, the self-directed, inquiry-based element, the Wicklow Democratic School has its own pedagogical framework that guides its work, and you don't need to get bogged down in the detail, but it's the keys in the centre. Those keys in the centre in here, according to how they organise their work, they emphasise that those 5 keys unlock the lifelong learning skills that range from, on the left-hand side there, the green key to connection and belonging, all the way through to things like compassion and collaboration. And participation is the key kind of driver of how all that kind of works. That's what we want to get to, and we'll touch off many of those as we go. So I'm nearly done. 2 to go before I start the proper discussion. Just to give you a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the actual school itself. So it was founded 10 years ago by a group of concerned parents and educators. Concerned for what reason? Concerned because the experience of their child in mainstream school wasn't what it could have been. So some children were very broken, some children were doing well but not flourishing. So there was kind of maybe a discussion in households that maybe we can do something slightly different and so on. And then when you look at that against the nature of what the system in the formal education system looks like and so on, there was discussion, and this has been going on for decades, obviously here and elsewhere. And inevitably what has happened is that a lot of the participants or the pupils or the learners in the Wicklow Democratic School often come with a diagnosis or identification, as I've mentioned here, of being neurodivergent or other SEN type labels, if you want to call it that. And just finally, the piece about how many are we talking about? You can see some of the facts and figures on the left-hand side. Just to draw your attention to it, is that it's fee-paying, and I'll explain why in a second, but it's based on a sliding scale according to the income of the parent. So that's how it's organised. And students are given the space and the support to graduate with a QQI level 5. So that's our framework of qualifications from an Irish perspective. And just interestingly, so TUSLA, I know there are some TUSLA colleagues here and so on, so it's registered with TUSLA, but it falls into the not recognised category in terms of a school. And because of that, it doesn't acquire any kind of state funding, and 2 of the main reasons are because it's not following the state curriculum, and the facilitators are not staff as in teacher, council registered staff. So that's just to give you the flavour of what it looks like and so on. If you look at their website, you'll get some more details and so on if you want over time, but that's the nature of it. So I'll go over here, just give me a second, we'll go over here and get set up. Okay, so I'm going to kick off, and the way we're kind of going to kind of do this is, the strong theme that's been running through the conference is, as we said, that participation is a fundamental right of all young people and so on. And we want to kind of explore what that feels like and looks like in a democratic school. What does it look like in practice? And when we were kind of preparing this, there are several elements that you could look at or try and identify as examples of that, that show the nature of participation within a democratic school. So, Dorothee, I'm going to start with you. When we look at the nature of what a democratic school looks like in practice, there's a whole debate about the notion or the balance of voice and power. Do you want to say a little bit about what that looks like in reality?
Sorry, I'm lost.
Yeah, okay. Rachel, do you want to kick off there in terms of that piece around the nature of what it looks like in practice from the point of view of voice and power for the young person and the facilitators?
Yeah, sure. So everyone in the school is an equal participant. We'll get into the formal structures of the school a bit later, but everyone has an equal voice and they're all involved with running this organisation together to whatever extent they choose or in that moment. And we know that participation in education is very important to young people, as we heard from the panel this morning, and there's also been a survey done by the Youth Parliament that said less than half of Irish young people feel that they have a say in their schools, and that equality in school is the most important issue that's affecting young people. So it is a very timely topic, and we're actively facilitating that in our school.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And just to continue with that kind of particular point, one of the core components of the democratic school in your example is what the young people learn. Can you just give us an example of what that looks like, or what are the kind of core things that they learn as part of their experience?
Yeah, so as we saw with the very information-filled graphic you showed, we do have our pedagogical approach based on what we think it means to learn how to learn and to develop those skills for lifelong learning, for self-advocacy, for being able to communicate compassionately and collaborate effectively. And we know that when young people enter mainstream education, their curiosity and their creativity plummet and continue to decline the longer they're in mainstream education. This is documented now. And so we're really trying to cultivate that curiosity, and we have an inquiry-based kind of learning approach, which lets people kind of start from where they're at, start from what they're interested in, and lead their own education with scaffolding and support from facilitators.
Exactly, thank you. That's a really good kind of description of it. And Dorothee, so what you're after saying, Rachel, is that's education for democracy in a way. That's the kind of core kind of building blocks of what's needed. Dorothee, do you want to talk a little bit about then the other element of what happens within a democratic school, which is education through democracy?
Yeah, so very often when we talk about democratic education, it's framed as the skill that you need to learn to become a good citizenship, and it's framed and it's done sometimes in a very non-democratic way. So you'd be in a classroom, the life is very regimented in the classroom, you didn't decide anything about actually what you're being taught, and then you're told about democracy. So what is interesting in this school is that you really learn through democracy, through democratic living, and in a small community. So it's really a very intense experience of living democratically in a community, a very for a long time, like many days, like 5 days, 9, the whole your whole schooling experience. Sorry.
Absolutely, and the difference there between the education for democracy and education through democracy is very interesting, and a kind of core element of what a democratic school kind of looks like. And just before we leave this first bit, the other element that's kind of pointed out a lot around democratic schooling is the idea of the link between well-being and agency because of participation. So Rachel, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge focus on well-being in our school because we know that students are not going to learn effectively if their well-being is not good. There's a study at a DCU a few years ago that said 4 in 10 young people in Ireland experience severe depression and anxiety, which is a big number. And there's a developmental psychologist, Peter Gray, who has highlighted that these trends, the decline in youth mental health, which we can see in Ireland and internationally, that they are correlated with a decline in sense of control. So that's a big part of democratic education, is it's giving back a meaningful sense of control to young people. And he also highlights a decline in intrinsic motivation, so doing something just because you want to and you care about it, not for a grade or for approval or for money. And a decline in ability to play or even just to move around and be active, because play is very, very important for development, especially emotional development, but it's also inherently intrinsically motivated. So when children and young people don't have that time and space to play, that's linked to them not having that intrinsic motivation and that sense of control.
So what I'm hearing you're saying, and I'm sure what everybody kind of agrees with as we listen to it, is that when we think about a democratic school, what are the kind of core components that we're hearing about? We're hearing about a place where participation is at the centre. We're hearing about a place where young people are transformed from passive recipients in other systems into more active kind of decision makers and agents in their own life, if you like, and that in some way has the capacity to support and develop a better sense of well-being. So that's the first area we kind of wanted to look at, was that sense of what does it look like in practice and so on. So if I move on to the next area that we've kind of talked about, is that youth participation is very much embedded in most practices and decisions within the democratic school, and this is what makes it different. This is what makes it different to many mainstream settings and so on. So in the day-to-day sense. So Rachel, I'm going to ask you about this because you see this every day of the week in terms of what you do. If we start with the formal side, the formal kind of structures, what kind of structures allow young people to participate in decisions?
Yeah, so we have our school meeting, which happens twice a week, and this is a place where everyone, it's one person, one vote, and we vote using a consent-based approach, so it's not majority voting. So if anyone objects to a proposal, we'll hear that objection and we won't pass a proposal until it's within everyone's range of tolerance, as we say. So that's a place where people can propose to, take trips, to get certain supplies. They can also propose to change any of the rules or agreements in the school, because we do have a lot of agreements, which might be surprising when you think about this type of school. And we also have a variety of committees and clerkships and roles that people can be elected to, which I think is a great example of what we heard in the youth panel, where students will rise to the level of responsibility that you give them, and people do really rise to that, and they help to run the school and the various roles. And we also have 2 or 3 times a week, we have meetings, small group meetings. We call them pods, which is another place where people have the chance to share their views on certain things that are happening in the school. The staff regularly use those to canvass students on different ideas or things we're considering, and get their opinions.
It just sounds amazing when you hear that and you hear the nature of that. This is the way that they do their business. When you were telling me about it initially, when Dorothee was doing her work as well, it's very much, you can see that participation is structured into governance. It's part and parcel of the everyday. It's not just a kind of by the way or an informal. It's actually part of the structure. It's part of kind of what you do. And then Rachel, in relation to that's the kind of formal structures. What about the kind of the culture? I suppose is the other element of that. You can formal structures as you want, but things mightn't necessarily work. What about the culture? How does culture facilitate all of this as well?
Yeah, so there's an effort to make a balance between kind of challenging and cherishing. So in mainstream school, a lot of times you have kind of high expectation and low care. And in democratic school, you run the risk of having high care but low expectation. So it's that balance of really caring for the students and also kind of pushing them and working with them to set goals and work towards those goals. And so there's a lot of effort to build trust and develop that trust and really get to know these students. And so a lot of things are based on consent, being able to say no to things and that's okay. And, just constantly asking people, inviting them, trying to involve them. And we also have a focus on communication. And so we do a lot with nonviolent communication, restorative practice, and that's within the formal structures and the informal and the cultural.
Yeah, and Dorothee, from your experience of being there for the research and so on, can you give it kind of an example of where you can see that kind of participation in action?
And it's really the complementarity of the formal and the informal process that make it work very well, because you could have certain students who actually go to the school meeting or who have a role in the school meeting or will make a proposal, but you have students that will, for various reasons, will stay out of the processes. So it's really the combination of the highly participatory culture, the mindset of people. It's even a bit difficult to describe. You go around the space and you have conversation between adults and children that are always framed with equality and with curiosity from the part of the adult. In a way that is, it's in the atmosphere. So that's really the both that makes it work, I think.
I remember hearing this the first time and saying to myself, when you think about participation and what we try to do and so on, like it's not just an add-on, it is the system. Like in their day-to-day work, it's that struck me very strongly, that it's very much kind of part of the system, what the system is. So then if we look at the opportunities that this way of working creates for young people at the Wicklow Democratic School, Dorothee, what would you say, when we think about young people feeling that their voice is listened to and central and so on, what happens when these young people realise that their voice is genuinely valued? What did you find, or what did you see firsthand?
So a lot of things would be similar to what the youth panel shared this morning in terms of empowerment and confidence. But maybe one thing that I can add to that, like the research I'm doing is looking specifically at inclusion. And as we mentioned, a lot of the students who are coming into the school had very difficult experience in mainstream sometimes, and are coming with what sometimes is recognized as special educational needs. And for them, this experience where you are listened to without having to refer to your diagnosis, So this idea that you can you can voice your needs. Because everybody is voicing their need, and all the communities trying to work on how do we manage to meet everybody's needs in a sustainable way, without any need for a label or a diagnosis. And I think that's very powerful for them. And also the other thing would be the right not to participate. Also, we didn't talk about it too much today, but this idea that you can actually step out of activities, step out of classes, because it doesn't feel right or something like that. So that's also something that is very powerful for these young people.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks, Dorothee. And when you think about the day-to-day activities and the opportunities that this way of working creates for young people, how does it shape their sense of responsibility?
So definitely for students who are really engaged in the clerkship, and especially for a long time, who have role in the school meeting, for example, they're chairing or who have role in the restorative cafe, which is what people who are dealing with conflict resolution, they clearly say that it has developed their sense of responsibility, their willingness to care for their community. But what is interesting is that, again, not every student will take on clerkships. So also that the school has a way sometimes to create clerkships for people, and it's in the spirit of sociocracy. It's something that is used in sociocracy, where instead of finding people to take on role, you actually find role for people. So like that, there were 2 students who become dragons clerks, and with this idea that they were going to support how we can embed more dragon stuff in the school, basically. And because that was their special interest, and okay, maybe but they wouldn't be involved in a clerkship otherwise, and this was created specifically for them, and it gave them a role. And then from that, maybe they also will join another clerkship to do something different in the school. So that's one thing, and then also very often individual projects become collective projects. So if you run, for example, one student is running a cafe regularly to fundraise, where he bakes cakes and stuff, but he needs others to be involved. So he needs to socialize his projects, and he needs to get it approved, and then he needs to people help him bake. So again, it fosters that sense of collective engagement.
Yes, and like, I don't know what you think, but from what I'm hearing and what I've learned from these colleagues over the last, kind of with Dorothee, the last number of years, and Rachel obviously more recently, is that sense that this space allows for a voice, agency, belonging, and that sense of responsibility to kind of grow and develop in a way that mightn't happen otherwise. So it's just fascinating to see how it can happen. And as I said at the start, it's not the magic bullet, but it's an example of a possibility and of things that can actually happen. So they're the kind of opportunities, but on the other side of the coin, and I'm sure it's a thought that's on the back of all your minds, is, what are the challenges that go with this way of working? And it's one of the things that I like to spend a bit of time getting my head around as well, trying to figure out, what and why, and what was the benefit of this kind of work and so on. Dorothee, I'll stay with you in a sense of, and this is a really interesting point I think that I've learned from you, is that does giving everyone a voice mean that everyone can use it equally?
Yeah, so that's a difficulty, and I've touched on it already. It's like you have students that still, first, if they're coming from mainstream school, there is a phase of adaptation where they actually have to learn to use their voice, and they may not do it. So, and then depending on age, sometimes depending on gender, so not the typical, like you would say, boys are necessitated. It depends on the balance of age. But there are also, non-binary or transgender students also. So yeah, no, not everybody is using their voice equally, and sometimes parents have to step in. But the staff is doing a lot of work in trying to balance that. But then it requires a lot of resources, and it is not funded, and nobody is making any money out of that. And so it's very stretched. So sometimes, it can be difficult. Yeah.
And Rachel, can I ask you as well? One of the things that kind of comes up a lot in the literature, and as we've talked about a lot, is the idea of the balance between the individual and the collective in a school like this. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, or what your experience is in that? And Dorothee, you might add to that as well.
Yeah, so we do talk about kind of the difference between freedom and license. Like it's a community as much as it is a school, and a lot of people in general, and especially young people, they haven't had the opportunity to be part of a community before, so they don't always know, what that means. And kind of we have conversations then, like we get into kind of politics classes and looking outwards outside of the school and into our families or our local communities or whatever, and we talk about, should we care about other people and why, and and how do we care for other people. So there's the balance, because it is a model that's very adapted to each person, so it is individualized in that sense, but it's also learning how to collaborate and how to be part of this learning environment where everyone is trying to be mindful of each other's needs and be able to express their needs and all that. And
Dorothee, what would you say from your experience as well with the research? What did you find?
Yeah, so that it's a difficult balance, and that participatory process, you don't want them to be only used to meet individual needs. But then I would say that what I have seen, and sometimes there is a bit of that in the school, but what I see, it's overcoming something that is much wider than the school, which is connected with a very individualist culture. And then does mainstream school actually manage to overcome that either? Because then you have competition and you have a stratification also in the mainstream school system. So in a way, yes, there is a bit of an individualist culture sometimes in the school, but it is something that is first is balanced by staff intervention, but is also everywhere. So how do you? Yeah,
it's bigger than the school.
Yes,
as such.
It's much bigger than the school.
And just before we leave this bit, I mentioned it in my intro. You've both mentioned it as well about the fact that the school isn't funded by the state. What are the kind of the financial kind of practical constraints that are kind of part and parcel of the model?
Yeah, so we're completely self-funded. So some of that comes from the membership dues from families who are enrolled. It also means that we need to spend our staff resource on fundraising and grant applications, which are challenging because we don't fit neatly into a box for those applications. There's also no training that exists to become a democratic educator or a facilitator. So there's a big kind of learning curve for any staff member who joins our school, and then the fact that we can't pay, kind of teachers' wages, and this is getting better, but we're still a ways off. That also limits the pool of applicants for those roles, because not everyone can afford to, take that lower wage.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, isn't it, about the fact, pick up the CAO guide. There's a code for every course that you want to study, apart from if you want to be a liberal educator in this particular way. It's kind of an interesting kind of observation, isn't it? So we're moving into the final section, and I suppose the point here is about what advice would you give people here in trying to achieve what the conference theme is about in terms of moving the frontiers of youth participation forward? So we've heard about a model, heard about an idea. I'm sure you have loads of questions in your head that we get to. But what advice would you give? And I mean, Rachel, I'll start with you. Like, what needs to shift in how adults think about children and young people to help this to happen?
Yeah, I think it is that just trusting in young people to, be capable and competent. And I have really fascinating conversations with 7 and 8 year olds all the time. Like, we have students who are leading classes, teaching biology or whatever it is. And when you give them those opportunities, they do step up. And just that modeling as adults, modeling that learning curiosity and lifelong learning and openness, and modeling the healthy kind of communication habits and learning those things for ourselves so that we can model them.
And Dorothee, if you were to think about some of those kind of real life situations and learnings that you could bring forward, what would be some of them that you'd offer to people here as they kind of go back to their own work after this?
Well, I think in education, like in child protection, you think about protection and it's always interfering with the participation, right? And in education also, it's protection and best interest, and we always think that then it means that children cannot make decisions. So that would be to really discern in your day-to-day life when as educator, when you're making a decision for a child, is it really to protect him or for his best interest? Or is it just because it's much easier for you to make the decision or to control, what's going on in the classroom or in the... So it's really that change of mindset of thinking, actually, just step back. In education, children can make really good decisions.
So what I'm hearing from what both of you are saying is there's a mindset change bit that's still in transition, that we're moving along that kind of trajectory or that kind of place, if you like, but also that systemic piece, that it's part of that bigger question about who are we, what are our values, in a kind of a neoliberal environment that we find ourselves in. Right, so I'm going to put you to the pin of your collar before we finish up. We've a short video from the young people from the school, just 2 minutes of a video that just shows the nature of their experiences of it. Before I get to that, I'm going to put you to the pin of your collar. Dorothee, one takeaway. What's your one takeaway that you'd offer to people as they leave?
Well, the impact of participation on well-being and inclusion, really it's a happy place, like really happy place. And it's...
And Rachel, what would you say? What's your key takeaway that you'd offer to people?
Just that, it's not just about increasing participation in education. Like, we see our school as an example of what's possible. As a real utopia, it's a phrase from Eric Olin Wright, of demonstrating what it can really look like to have genuine democracy in practice, and to help these young people develop skills to be active participants for the rest of their lives.
So it's a really nice way to link to the short video that we've here. You'll hear it from them yourself. You can judge it for yourself. So I always wanted to say this. Roll it there, Cormac.
Democratic school is helping me prepare for life because it allows me and makes me think for myself. And I'm not just relying on other people to think for me, and I'm learning life skills by directing myself.
And I think because there's no one holding you to other things, and you're the only one holding yourself to stuff, which I think it's at first it's hard because you're I could just do nothing. But then it gets a lot better because you realise, it's a better feeling when you do something.
You have a lot more authority than you would in a mainstream school, and that often leads to a lot more interesting discussions and classes in the school.
It's helped me learn how to use nonviolent communication and how to communicate properly with people on a good level, and that improves my relationship with everybody I interact with in my daily life.
I think it's really helped me motivate myself and teach myself ways I can study and how I like to do my work and stuff.
It's taught me a lot of conflict resolution skills and better communication.
That it's not just a case of we do our own learning. It's we do classes, and a lot of the time people just think that the littles here, they think that the littles just run wild, but we actually do classes like maths and reading and writing with them, like they have more of a schedule than like older kids would.
The one-on-one staff and student support is really beneficial for a lot of the students here, and really helps the students form connections with their peers while having adults that they can trust and help them navigate their education while still being self-directed.
Lots of graduates, like, they come back to parties and stuff, or just even to visit. It's kind of nice to know that, like, even, like, no matter how long you were gone, you have, like, somewhere that you can go to.
So I love that because it's so real. Like, it's just, you know, it speaks for itself. So we're nearly at burger time. So we'll take 2 questions, and obviously we can continue the discussion later on or tomorrow as well. We'd welcome that. So does anybody want to throw in a question?